Hello and welcome to Sir Atkinson's Film Club. Today we're going to talk about Uncharted, the movie that almost wasn't, just because it bounced around Hollywood what seemed like for 10 years. I remember reading the script maybe 3 or 4 years ago before shooting happened, and it was already onto its about fourth director then. This movie's a little close to my heart, seems though I worked on it for the best part of a year. Uncharted was shot all over the place, but predominantly in Babelsberg Studios over in Germany, just outside of Berlin. Them studios sort of actually got an interesting background. They were built in the 1920s and were part of the propaganda campaign for Goebbels and the Nazi regime. Now it's a world-renowned film studio and gets lots of big stuff go through there. It's had Wes Anderson movies, Quentin Tarantino. I've worked on a couple of movies there myself actually over the years, and Uncharted took up half of the studio complex itself. The other half actually was The Matrix 4, which was being shot alongside Uncharted, so they were fighting over studio space and all the things that go along with that. Uncharted is directed by Ruben Fleischer, who stepped in literally 2 months before this movie was started shooting, which is rare for a director to do, and actually really impressed me working on the crew because he still made it his own movie, which is difficult to do when you're following up art, direction, production designs, stunt teams are already had their ideas and input. But he came in and I actually think was partly down to Reuben's direction. And, he's a very calm individual. He's not someone who goes screaming and shouting around set, but he certainly knows how to make people motivated in the right way and also lets them know when he's not happy with something. My background in movies isn't part of the creative side, so watching directors do their thing I always find super interesting because it's a big learning point. So when I'm at Video Village or around the directors and producers as they're talking creative stuff, it's very interesting to listen to people like Reuben talk. He kept the pace of this movie for a while. I tell you what's currently Uncharted territory, it's the like button. If you just hit the like button, do me a favour. This movie was joked about to be cursed around Hollywood for numerous things. The fact that directors kept dropping out, the script changes. When this movie was about to shoot, we all went and did what was called tech recce or tech scout, as it's called in America. And all that is basically going to check all the locations before shooting, and each department goes through each and every one of them. And that was February 2020 with the intention to shoot 2 weeks later. So we went all around Germany, all around Spain and a few other spots, checking all these out, and then COVID hit. So another thing against this movie's name, thinking, will this ever happen? Sure enough though, the studio put all their policies in place, all the new COVID regimes, and it started shooting again in July, and it ran through to December. But once it started shooting, actually the hiccups were less and less, and barring the odd, COVID drama, which every movie currently and has done for the last 2 years is experiencing, nothing really stopped this movie from completing, and it wrapped on time, which was rare, and it was even rarer back then when COVID was still a brand new thing in the industry. So Reuben was a big part of that, but also the teams and the crew that went behind that. One of the first COVID teams put in place, the testing regime, everything that's now becoming old hat was actually brand new on this movie. So to see it out in cinemas now is, a big pat on the back for everyone involved. The writer of the screenplay is Rafe Judkins, who had actually been working with for the last 2 years on a different project, which he's showrunning out in Prague, which is Wheel of Time, Amazon's, I think, most downloaded TV show at the moment. But when I read this script, it was funny, I didn't, we get a lot of scripts when you're working on stuff, and I started reading it, and halfway through I was like, this is good, this is great. And so I flicked back to the front, like, who's attached to this? And it was the guy I was actually working with, and I could tell the quality level of the script just because how involved I was already, and I was really excited about shooting this one. This one had a lot of producers attached just because of the size of it, and producers on set, it can range, especially when movies this big. But I got quite friendly with one of the producers, Alex Gartner, who was a great guy, and he was so passionate about this project that I thought it would be give him a special mention here because he really pushed it from start to finish. And actually, when I saw a screening of this about a year and a half ago, he was as passionate then as he was pre-shoot. It's people like Alex who get these movies off the ground and get them in the cinemas, and it's the reason why we sat down talking today about them and why we're going to go out at the weekend and watch them. So it's great to meet people who, are that involved at that level and still care so much. Cinematographer who was a very talented guy and had a working relationship with Reuben in the past was Chung Hoon Chung, who is a Korean cinematographer who worked with Reuben on Zombieland, if I'm not mistaken. Also a nice guy, and definitely shot the way he wanted to shoot throughout this team. And it was another guy who's interesting to listen to, and certainly, you know, a master of what he does. So for people like me, when you're on set and you're listening to these people and you're so interested in movies, but you don't have their skill sets, that's, for me, it's like being a free day at university. They're teaching you things that you couldn't pay to learn. The production designer on this one was Shepard Frankel, who he's one of these guys who's a bit of a genius, but also very intense. Fun to be around, but you hear him coming before you see him coming. And it was great to see these sets come together because every one of them was brilliant in their own way. The two leads in this one are Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg. Now, there was a little bit of controversy for the selection of the Nathan Drake character, who was Tom Holland, partly because of the physicalities of Nathan Drake in the game. Now, I wasn't a player of the game, so when I read it, I certainly didn't think anything of it, but once I started shooting the movie, I thought, let me have a little look and research into this. And I can understand why, if you were a big fan of the Uncharted series, maybe this didn't particularly fit the character style that you saw. A little bit in the same way of the fans of the Jack Reacher books were never really happy with Tom Cruise in that role because of his physical assets. Now, me as a fan who hasn't watched this and going to watch purely on a cinematic reason, Tom Holland nails this. He's charismatic throughout. He bounces off Mark Wahlberg, where they're not siblings in this show, but there's almost a big brother, little brother role going on, where do they love each other? Do they hate each other? Is it both? You know, and it plays all the way through the movie. Now, where I hope this gets a franchise run, so I can see these two characters develop and see how that'll go, because there's a lot of humour involved. Now, if there was one criticism, maybe I could have took that humour further and really pushed it with them too, which they definitely could do as the franchise went on. This movie's their origin story, and it leads on to possible sequels, so we'll see if it goes that way, and it certainly wouldn't be something I'd be against. Antonio Banderas plays a big part in this movie. For me, he's an established actor, and the role he plays here is probably a bread and butter role for him, but it was great being on set around him. He has a presence, and he doesn't let the side down or himself down at all in this movie. He plays a moneyed up bad guy who butts heads a lot with our not so good guy heroes in the flick, and he plays the part great. It works in two ways. One, he has the edge of a baddie, but also he's someone that can counter Mark Wahlberg's presence on screen, which is needed in a blockbuster like that. You can't just have all the presence be the heroes. You need someone who can hold their own as the bad guy, and he more than does that. The two female leads on this, Sophia Ali and Tati Gabrielle, both played their parts great, because as with all characters in this movie, and the women are no different, you can't always tell where the moral compass is. The more charismatic they are, the more you like them, but that doesn't necessarily make them a good person. And the female characters follow the same suit as the male characters in this, and if anything, follow the male leads in this way. Tati Gabrielle particularly stood out for me as one of the stronger takeaways from this movie. I hope we'll see her in some other stuff, and from a personal note, every time I spoke to her on set, what a great person. If you're trying to put in your mind's eye where to place this movie, look somewhere between National Treasure with Nicolas Cage, which is a very fun family treasure hunt movie, and The Da Vinci Code with Tom Hanks, which is a lot more problem solving, cleverer, and it's adapted from a best-selling book. Where this movie succeeds is you are gripped to your seat. There's loads of good action, the characters are great, and the chemistry between the characters are good. Where this movie may fail occasionally is the complications in the treasure hunting don't always make sense. The backgrounds and the vistas are great to see. Certainly the Barcelona stuff is brilliant. It was great to shoot because I get to spend a few weeks in Barcelona shooting there, but I'm not sure that people who are going to watch this who really enjoyed the Da Vinci Code, for instance, for trying to figure out the problem solving side of things, are not going to watch this and think, wow, I got the same payoff. I'm hearing a lot less pushback from the gaming crowd recently, and Tom Holland's on an absolute run with the Spider-Man franchise. Some would argue that he's been the best Spider-Man, and the numbers don't lie. I loved him and Wahlberg's chemistry on screen, and I'd certainly go and see a sequel. If something was to let this movie down, it would be the treasure hunting side of things. The sets are great, it's acted well, it's a blockbuster, you're watching a blockbuster happen. I would still say go and see it. It's definitely take a trip to the cinema and watch it, just because of the size and the epic proportions. Also, I would say it's great to see blockbusters that don't have superheroes attached at the moment. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but to see an actual action film and be able to see it at the cinema is probably the best way to see it. So my recommendation on this is a go out and see it movie. Now, like I said, I'm probably a little biased, but what more do you want from a blockbuster? It's a little bit 12-year-old and older, I'd say. It's not fully family friendly. There's some sexual references, some swear words, but it's certainly fun for most of the family. And I've seen it twice now. I saw an early screening long before the VFX and stuff was finished, and it was a really rough cut, and I almost forgot all that movie. And I saw it again when it came out, and it blew me away. Visually, it's a great movie, and depending on how it does will probably depend on if Columbia are going to make sequels out of it, like they have done with the Jumanji series, The Rock, and things like that. So, there's an appetite to do that. I had a great time working on this movie, partly because I love the travel when you were on set and you're working away. But this one particularly because the Spanish part of it, it was in the middle of a lockdown when most people are trapped, so I consider myself very lucky. And, we were masked up, tested every day, travelled all around the Spanish coast and Barcelona as a large group, in a big bubble if you like, but it was still special. And some of the caves, now I'd love to put a load of pictures that I've got of me on set and things like that, but obviously there's copyright and IP that belong to Sony and Columbia Pictures, which, it would mean I'd never be able to post again, but also it's not very professional if I did that. But I've got some pictures of me in and around the coast at that time when I was on that trip that aren't related to the movie, which I'll post. They'll give you an idea of what I mean about how fun it was to shoot this one. But I'm quite interested to see what you think. Do you think it's worth a sequel? Did you enjoy it? What was the highlight for you? What did it miss on? I will tell you a little secret though, but you just have to do one thing. Can you just hit the like button, please? It's a little bit uncharted territory at the moment. And then the subscribe button if you like what I'm doing. I really love talking about movies and talking about the movie industry. And, if I build a little audience, I'll be able to get people from the industry on the channel. And we could go a bit further in depth in some of this stuff, which would be quite good. Leave a comment if there's anything that you'd like me to review, or there's any suggestions or criticism. I'm trying to improve. You can probably tell by my editing that it's a work in progress. So hopefully I'll see you again soon when we talk about my next cinema visit, or if any big cinema news comes out in the meantime, or if there's anything that pops up, in the movie or TV world that's worth speaking about, I'll put a little video out. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you're enjoying the content. Give us a like and subscribe if you do. Anyway, see you next time. Much love.